Oh, Doherty's in town! And I am back for episode 2 of the O'Doherty's Den official Rise podcast. Happy New Year! We're off to a cracking start, aren't we? Already locked down. But we've had some good news here in O'Doherty's Den. The podcast has been accepted for iTunes, finally. So we can get the ball rolling now, get a few more episodes churned out, and I might get a few more listeners. Wherever you're listening to this podcast at, I would ask if you could subscribe, whether that's YouTube to my new O'Doherty's Den YouTube channel, where this episode will be posted in full, or, as I say, at iTunes, at the Apple Podcasts app. And if you could leave a review, that would be massively appreciated. Not only has the O'Doherty's Den podcast been accepted for iTunes, but we've also got the new riseengland.com website up and running, which launched on New Year's Day, January the 1st. And we're going to kick this episode off by having a quick look at the website, and I'll take you through it bit by bit. So if you've not been to the new Rise Underground website, England's maddest wrestling show, you can do that now by heading to riseengland.com, and you can follow along as I'm taking you through each part of the website. So we start with the latest merch release, the Rise Underground Champions Special Edition white t-shirt with Gene Money on the front, the current Rise champion, and the black version with Big F and Joe on the front, the two-time Rise champion. We've been needing a new Rise merch design for a while now. The last t-shirt that we designed was the Games of Death t-shirt, which was for the Games of Death 2020, which has now been rebranded as the Games of Death 2, because we don't know when that's going to happen. As I said in the last episode, we've planned it for later this year. So as it stands, it's booked in for November the 6th. Oh, I've just seen someone fall over outside. I wish that was on camera there. There's a lad jogging past and he's took the biggest bump I've ever seen. Oh, man. That's distracted us. What was I talking about there? I cannot believe that. The amount of people that jog past here, and that's the first fella I've seen take a bump. Now he's just jogging on, acting like now it's happened. There was someone right in front of him who saw him and all, who went to give him a hand when he got up. It was funny. He's all right, though. He's jogging on. Anyway, what was I talking about there? The new merch design. The new Rise Underground Champions t-shirt. Like I say, we had a t-shirt designed for the Games of Death 2020, but that had the year on the front, 2020, and the lineup on the back. We're going to get a new Games of Death 2 t-shirt designed for the Games of Death tournament when it happens. But we are going to honour all tickets. Everyone who has the Games of Death tickets will be able to attend the Games of Death when it happens, because we're going to make sure that when that does happen, it will be in front of a live, packed out Rise crowd. And you will get the full experience, not only of Rise, but of the Games of Death, because as I keep saying, we are going to make sure that tournament is the best deathmatch tournament that's ever taken place in Europe. And speaking of death matches, I'm actually waiting for a call right now. I've had to download Skype. I don't know if it's working yet. I haven't checked. Because I'm expecting a Skype call from someone who's going to interview me about death matches. I don't really know much else about what's going to be asked in this interview, but I got an email and he's going to be interviewing me and Big Joe separately. So I'm going to actually record the audio of that interview, and that's going to be part of this podcast episode. So later on in the episode, you're going to get to hear that interview I have talking about deathmatch wrestling. And I'm sure we'll get into the Games of Death more, as well as the Outlaw Cup, when we have that conversation. So as I say, that new merch design is there, ready to go. It's on demand printing. So if you order it, the company will print the shirt, send it out to you, and let us know the quality of the t-shirts, what the postal service was like. So all of the merch you see on the Rise England website now is integrated to be sent out, as I say, on demand. So if you order any of the shirts, one of these new merch releases, for example, if you order the Gene Money t-shirt, that will come straight from the supplier. Whereas in the past, most of the merch in Rise has been sent from me. I've had to do it myself. So we've decided to move online, which helps because it means we can release more merch items without having to invest in actually buying them up front and taking that risk of how many people's going to buy them, etc. I have done pre-orders usually for things like the hoodies or different designs in the past, it's quite difficult and it's time consuming, and that's why sometimes people have to wait quite a while to get these merch orders when it's a pre-order. Whereas when I have them in stock, I can get them sent out within a day. There's been quite a few people last year who were ordering merch from the Rise England Big Cartel store, which comes directly from me. And lo and behold, for the first year of my life, I was actually getting the merch out bang on time. Some people were getting them the very next day. But I have to give a shout out to me mum, who's been helping out with some of the orders, because a lot of my stock is up home in Bishop Auckland, bonny lad. So she's been sending some of it out and helping out when it comes to going to the post office and getting things out there on time. So I can't take full credit, but it's definitely an improvement. So moving on, we've got the next section of the website, the latest videos, and that is linked directly to youtube.com, The Rise Online, which I talked about in the last episode. I've been putting all my eggs in the basket of YouTube lately and decided that I'm just going to go all out and try and see what we can do with YouTube. Make a really committed effort to grow on the YouTube channel. Because, as I've started to see with things like Facebook, that seems like it's more for current content. Rise thrived on Facebook when we had regular events, when events were happening often. We were able to get clips out immediately, share them on Facebook, and that was where we were getting those viral videos a few years ago. Whereas now I've moved the focus more onto YouTube because I'm able to get the backlog of all the Rise previous shows, previous matches, all this different stuff out there on YouTube. And it doesn't really matter when it was recorded because a lot of the audience on YouTube are new viewers anyway from around the world. So it's not necessarily as important for it to be up-to-date content. It's more important that it's delivered properly, presented properly, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really enjoying where the YouTube channel's going at the moment. So as we enter the Full Match Fridays latest videos section of the Rise website, we've got all those latest videos, like I say, that have been posted to YouTube over the last few days. So at the moment, you'll see that quite a lot of that is the Women's Wrestling Underground tournament, the first one that took place in 2018 for the Rise Women's Championship. So that full Women's Wrestling Underground tournament was posted just before New Year on YouTube, and that's had a few thousand views. That's doing well. And that's featuring Lana Austin, who made her Rise debut in this tournament, Roxy, the Voodoo Queen Amara, who to this day is still the Rise Women's Champion. We've got Lizzie Evo, Young Cindy, and it also featured Charlie Morgan, Nightshade, and Misha, who you can see face Roxy in their singles match that is now on the YouTube channel. All of the matches from that tournament have been uploaded individually as well as the full tournament as one. So you can watch that anytime, and that will give you a taster of what to expect with the second Women's Wrestling Underground tournament that will be taking place this year. And that will happen whether that's behind closed doors, whether it's in front of a live crowd, it doesn't matter. We will make sure that the Women's Wrestling Underground tournament 2021 happens regardless. So as I say, all the latest uploads to the Rise channel are there at that latest videos section. We've got Miles vs. Dad that was posted recently. I think I posted that on Christmas Day. How was your Christmas? I can't imagine it was as bad as being in the Miles family household this Christmas after a year of lockdown with them two, Miles and his dad. We've got Saxon Huxley versus Big Effin' Joe. That Falls Count Anywhere heavyweight street fight that made headline news in Teesside, where Big Effin' Joe was body slammed on the middle of the main road in Borough. And that was the talk of the town after that match. It was in the newspapers. It was the #1 trending article on the Teesside Gazette website for a couple of days. It was in the printed versions of the papers. I had mates who I hadn't seen for years in the northeast who aren't even from Middlesbrough. This is surrounding towns, miles away from Middlesbrough. Mates who I hadn't seen for years were saying, "Have you heard about that wrestling show where that wrestler got body slammed on the road?" I said, "Have I heard about it? I was on the video in the middle of it all, man. It was Rise." So it was the talk of the North East. Caden said when he was at work, there was people he could hear just talking about it in passing who had nothing to do with him. He just overheard them. So that was amazing that we managed to get that break in the North East with that video. But it's a shame that we weren't able to follow on from that and actually get some momentum going, because not long after the famous Borough Body Slam happened, we had a show booked again a couple of months later. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 months later, And that one was shut down again because we've had problems in Middlesbrough with the council since day one, as you'll know from the very first show we ever tried to run in Middlesbrough. And I'm going to talk about that more in that very first O'Doherty's Den YouTube special that I was talking about on the last episode. That will be my first video edition of O'Doherty's Den, which is coming to YouTube soon. I'm just putting all the pieces together on that. And it's almost ready to go, so stay tuned for that. I can't give you a date on when that'll be released yet, because I'm working on so many projects at once that they're all just coming along at their own pace, slowly but surely. But as I say, the best way to keep updated is to be subscribed at YouTube, because when I post my O'Doherty's Den episodes to my channel, I'm always going to post a preview trailer on the Rise Underground YouTube channel, so that you can just directly link to that. If you subscribe to Rise, you'll get a notification if you subscribe for bell notifications saying that there's a new O'Doherty's Den available, and that will link to the full episode. And if you would prefer to listen to it on the podcast app, then you can just go to podcasts and search for Rise Underground O'Doherty's Den, and it should be the first one that comes up. And that Falls Count Anywhere street fight, watching it back these years later, I forgot all about just how crazy the whole match was. That match was in front of a really small but very rowdy crowd in Middlesbrough in this ropey venue that we managed to get. It was the only venue that would have us. Liberties in Town, it was called, ironically. And there was an NHS party on in the downstairs. I think it was an NHS party. While this street fight was going on anyway, we brawled out into the street. And all these people having this party could not believe their eyes when they looked outside, and there's a bouncer in his pants body slamming Big Saxon Huxley onto the picnic table outside. So I think we ruined the party for everyone. There's a bit where someone goes, says something, and Big Joe says, "I don't care about your fucking party." I would highly advise to watch that match. It's just craziness all the way through from start to finish. You've got me and the good doctor at ringside and all, me managing Saxon Huxley, and you've got the good doctor Leonardo Darwin in the corner of Big Joe. And not only was the match craziness, some of our best work at the time, we had more time on our hands back then because we were only running shows. I think we only had, when was that show? I think that was the end of December 2016, so we'll have had 3 shows that year. We had the infamous Ascent at Araya Suite show in the April of that year, and I'm going to do a full episode about that show because that within itself is legendary. If you were one of the 35 sellout attendees that were there that night, that will certainly be an episode worth listening to because you'll get to find out what was really going on behind the scenes on that night. But it's a pivotal moment in Rise when you look back. That Ascent 2016 Araya Suite show, the first Ascent tournament, and it was where we crowned the first Rise champion as well. When you actually look back to that show, that was the night where Rise truly began, England's maddest wrestling show as far as I'm concerned, because it was an all-or-nothing type scenario. I'd tried for months, years, to get Rise off the ground at this point, and I'd spent so much money on hiring this venue. The Rise Championship cost well over $1,000, and it put me out of pocket, and I knew it was an investment for the future. So when I turned up on that night at the Araya Suite and only 35 people showed up, it was absolutely heartbreaking. But we had a decision to make. We could have sulked and thought, that's it, there's Rise over, that's the last show. We go out with a almighty fizzle rather than a bang. Or we pick our heads up and we think, let's go out there and put on the best show we can have. Let's have a laugh. Let's enjoy it. It might be the last Rise show we ever have, but let's make it a good one. And some of the names that were on that show as well, if you look back, there was I think the opening match was a qualifier, a 5-way qualifier which featured Darius Lockhart from the USA, who's becoming quite a big name now. That was his debut in the UK, actually. We had Darius Lockhart versus Dave Graves, the grafter, versus the damn dirty dog, Gene Money, versus the sad boy, Michael Caden, versus... Who else was in this match? HT Drake, the gimmick killer. Is that it? It was a 5-way, I think, so it was Darius Lockhart, Dave Graves, Gene Money, Caden, and HT Drake. What an odd combination that is when you look back now. But this was before those guys had established themselves in Rise. And before they'd found their own niches. This was well before Michael Caden was doing any hardcore matches. This was well before that damn dirty dog, Gene Money, was in the absolutely phenomenal athletic condition he's in today. And we saw a young Darius Lockhart. We saw the grafted Dave Graves, who was just coming into his stride at that point. That was just before his career really took off, and he proved not long after this just how much of a wrestling machine he really is. So there really was some oddball matches on that card. And it also featured, as I say, the very first Ascent tournament. I think we saw Believer versus the Primate as one of those matches. We saw Big F and Joe versus our Uncle Bobby. The legendary Uncle Bobby. If you don't know who your Uncle Bobby is, you need to find out. A legend of Rise. Before Uncle Ralph, there was Uncle Bobby. And Uncle Bobby, the spirit of Uncle Bobby is what made Gene Money win that Rise Championship. You have to believe that. Will we ever see Uncle Bobby return to a Rise ring? We've seen some stranger things happen in this last 12 months. So I wouldn't put it past your Uncle Bobby showing up at Rise one day in the future. But I've gone so far off the beaten track yet again now that I forgot what I was talking about. We were talking about the Rise YouTube channel, the latest videos, Falls Count Anywhere, Heavyweight Street Fight, brilliant match, Big Joe versus Saxon Huxley. This was just after Saxon had been signed to WWE as well, literally a few days or maybe a couple of weeks after he'd first got that call up to take part in the UK Championship tournament, that first ever 16-man tournament. And that was massive for Saxon. And we were all so buzzing that Saxon had been given that opportunity, because it wasn't just big for Saxon, it was big for everybody, because by Saxon getting that rub, getting the eyes on him through the UK tournament, with him being a massive part of Rise and being a complete Rise original, then that meant that we were going to get the eyes on us as well, because to see Saxon wrestle, you had to come and see him wrestle in Rise at that point. And that's been the case for most of his career, to be fair. There's not many places you'll be able to go and see Saxon Huxley, apart from WWE and Rise Underground. The original 16-month reigning Rise champion. And Saxon was the Rise champion at the time of this match. And this was Big Joe's first opportunity at that Rise championship after coming so close in the Ascent tournament. But in that year, 2016, we had that Ascent show that I was talking about there. We had a decision to make. Like I say, do we continue or do we give up? And I'm not a quitter. I never give up. So that wasn't even an option. Everything had gone tits up because of how much I'd put into that show and gambled in terms of needing a good turnout. And it just didn't happen. And it was that make or break situation. Like I said, we went out there, we put on a great show, and lo and behold, by the grace of God, someone from the Brunel Social Club came to that show, Adam Nodwell, who was, if you look back on the original Brunel Social Club shows and some of those shows we did at Iger Studios back in 2017, late 2016, 2017, Adam Nodwell was our ring announcer, and he is one of the members of staff at the Brunel Social Club. If you're a Brunel Social Club attendee, you'll know Nodwell well. He's a big part of the family there at the Brunel Social Club, and I've been so grateful to have been able to call him a mate over these last few years and the help he gave back when Rise was just taken off. And anyway, he approached me not long after this Ascent show and said this would be brilliant for the Brunel Social Club. He talked to Nathan, the owner, who surprisingly was all for it. The only problem was they didn't have a room big enough at the time. The floor space was tiny. The dance floor itself was just over 14 feet. So we needed a small 14-foot ring maximum to be able to fit in that floor space. And we also needed a really low setting ring because the ceiling was so low. Anyone standing over 6 foot was almost nearly touching the ceiling before they'd even started wrestling. So we had two big obstacles to get around. And I was able to hire in the grapple wrestling ring, which was absolutely perfect size, and we couldn't have wished for it to be any better suited. That ring itself is a 14-foot ring, and it's got a low setting. So there we go, the stars aligned, and we got that show booked in for August of 2016. So it had been after the Ascent tournament, where I'd been head in my hands, devastated, thinking that's it, Rise is over, I've gave everything, I'm thousands in debt, I've got this Rise Championship belt that's worthless now because we haven't got any shows. I'd tried every venue in Leeds, I'd tried every venue in Middlesbrough, I'd tried every venue in Newcastle, and we weren't getting anywhere at this point until the light at the end of the tunnel with the Brunel Social Club. So that's a lesson for anyone who thinks about giving up. I could have gave up there after that Ascent show and thought, right, I've tried, it didn't work, did my best, and I give up. I could have walked away and thought, I'll cut my losses now, I'll not lose any more, and I'll just take it on the chin. But as I say, that's not how I work, so that wasn't an option. So I persevered, and just before I did get the offer of running a show at the Brunel, I was looking at ways we could run shows in fields in the middle of nowhere, in the village I live in, where my mum's from, in Toft Hill, or anywhere in Bishop Auckland. We were going to be getting minibuses coming, bringing people from Leeds and Middlesbrough to run a show in a field, because it was the only place I could get a show on. So I was willing to run a show anywhere to keep Rise going at this point. So that perseverance, I believe, was what led us to the Brunel Social Club. And fast forward the clock to August of that year and that first show at the Brunel Social Club, looking out the curtain and seeing that there's only 30 people in the whole building, to then looking out and seeing a queue from the doors of the Brunel Social Club all the way out of the car park, hundreds of people queued up to buy tickets to our show. You couldn't have more polar opposites within the space of a few months. And that just shows how the tables can turn at any moment. And that's been the case with Rise since day one. We have ups and downs constantly. It's an absolute roller coaster ride. And that's what's prepared me to be able to handle how I feel. Well, I feel like I've handled it quite well, this whole situation over the last year where we've been shut down. We've gone through so many trials and tribulations over the years that this is just part and parcel of what it's all about now. And adapting is the name of the game when it comes to promoting wrestling and bringing a product that is completely unique and original. But I'm going to tell more stories about all of those shows with their own dedicated episodes, because there's so much to talk about with every single event and everything going on around the times of those events. I've only just scratched the surface with stories about that Ascent tournament show, and I've only just scratched the surface with that Brunel show and how that came about. But the main focus for me at the moment is telling the stories of how Rise began, which I keep going back to, and that's going to be what that first YouTube episode is about. So for now, I'll not tell you any more stories of the early days. We'll leave it at that, and we'll talk in depth when it comes to it, about those 2016 shows and all those 2017 shows at Brunel, and then how we got Iger Studios, and then later on in the year, Temple of Boom. So I'm sat now looking back towards my laptop, and I've got the latest videos page loaded, and that was what we were talking about before I went on that tangent. So yeah, like I say, we've got all those matches. We've got Saxon Huxley versus Liam Slater for the Rise Championship. What an amazing match that was from our first Rise Rumble event at the Brunel Social Club back in January 2017. That was the second show we ran at the Brunel Social Club, and that one was sold out. Even more tickets sold than the first one. Well over 300 people. I think there was 350 people crammed into that room, which featured the first Rise Rumble, which was only a 12-person Rumble for the first one, because it was such a small room and ring. 30 people in that room, in that ring, would have been absolute chaos. It was chaos, as you can imagine, but that would have been just utter craziness. And it was almost fate that that bigger room came around just in time for us to be able to run the Rise Rumble 2018 the following year, the first 30-person over-the-top rope extravaganza from the Brunel Social Club. They were always within the first week of January. So it's the anniversary of all those shows around about this time, and I've been sharing some of those photographs on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and some of the videos from that time. For me, the Rise Rumbles are the perfect example of what Rise is all about. I've never seen a heated, genuine reaction like that to the end of the Rise Rumble 2018 anywhere in wrestling. And then the following year, to the day, the payoff when Big Joe finally got his revenge, and the pop he got for winning that Rumble was astronomical. Champagne celebrations, well, Rise Champagne, Lambrini, celebrations in the ring after his victory. What a moment. But like I mentioned, when we were doing those first few shows in 2016, because we only had 3 shows that year, we were able to put so much more time into doing crazy promo videos to build these matches and to build the storylines and the characters, especially the story of me and the Muscle Cat and Big Joe and Dr. Leonardo Darwin, the best friends story. Best friends turned bitter enemies. And the promo videos leading to that match we had in Middlesbrough, that Falls Count Anywhere street fight, where it was a challenge going out to all and every contender in the UK to come and face the Muscle Cat for that Rise Championship. And the challenger we did get was Big Joe and his best friend Leonardo Darwin, who at the time was claiming to be bound to a wheelchair. The manipulative and cunning good doctor. And you'll see how that played out, the whole wheelchair scenario, when he showed up at the Rise Rumble in 2017. And that video's on YouTube, and I think it's under the title A Masked Attacker Shows Up or something like that, or just have a look. You can have a look on the YouTube channel. You'll be able to see what happened when Darwin appeared at the 2017 Rise Rumble and came for me. He targeted me. And that video was our first ever Rise viral video, believe it or not. That video went viral on Facebook and had about 78,000 views after we posted it. And that was another sign that we were onto the right sort of thing. Because at that point, me, Darwin, Joe, Saxon, we were just completely unknown, really, in terms of British wrestling and the worldwide scene. So it was proven that the investment in these storylines, in these crazy angles and characters, was starting to pay off. Another promo leading up to that Middlesbrough match, and the response to me and Saxon putting out that video where I did the poem, was a day in the life of old Dockery and the Muscle Cat, and this was Darwin and Big Joe parodying. How do you say that? Parodying. Darwin and Big Joe parodying me and the Muscle Cat. And that's a really funny video if you go back and watch that one, where the good doctor's eating out of a nappy claiming he's me. Rise! Rise! That's where that comes from as well, where he's foaming at the mouth doing impressions of me. Muscle Cat! And we also had where Big Joe was confronted by Sick Nick Mundo, the Deathmatch legend, who asked Big Joe, is it worth it? This was the start of Big Joe's deathmatch career. He hadn't even had a deathmatch at this point. And Mundo asked him that question. And I wonder whether Joe will have those words in his mind for the rest of his career. Because the toll it takes on people's bodies and minds, these deathmatches, is unbelievable. And that documentary Nick Mundo made, The Trade, we were at the world premiere of that when we filmed this video. And that was where I first really saw that death matches could be pure art if they were done correctly. I'd always been a bit of a skeptic of death matches, but I realised that death matches are so powerful because of the adrenaline involved and like the dangers and the risk, that you combine that with a powerful story and you are onto absolute drama. So I really do think death matches, when done properly and combined with some great storytelling, can be so powerful and such a unique form of art. And I'll probably get on to more about that when this guy calls us and when we talk about death matches in this interview I'm going to be doing soon. And that video of Mundo questioning Joe is available as well at YouTube if you just type in Sick Nick Mundo questions Big Joe. Anyway, back to the website. So there we go, latest videos. And there's videos being uploaded multiple times a week now, so make sure you subscribe, make sure you visit risingland.com regularly to see what's being uploaded. And now we're moving on to the full shows section. So these are all of the full shows that are available to watch for free online at any time. And there's going to be more added. So this is what we've got at the moment, but I'm going through all the backlog, like I said in the last episode, going through all the backlog and re-editing some older shows to be uploaded in full HD, far better quality than they were uploaded originally. And hopefully they'll stand the test of time and they'll be able to be available for years to come for people to go back and watch. The Women's Wrestling Underground tournament is one of them that I uploaded in full HD. And I'm currently working on Big Joe's Lambrini Ring Rave that was never actually uploaded publicly. That's only available for Patreon subscribers, but that's going to be now uploaded onto YouTube in HD as an upcoming show. So you can look forward to that one. And there's some shows from 2018. We've got quite a lot of the 2018 shows that were never released publicly that are going to become available at YouTube. And then we've even got more recent shows like the Rise Rumble 2020 was never actually uploaded in full. It was uploaded as part of a lockdown episode, and the Rise Rumble 2020 match itself was uploaded, but never the full show. And never the full Rise Rumble 2018, actually, so that's another one that I'm going to whack up there in full in HD eventually. But the Rise Rumble 2018 is available to watch on demand anytime at YouTube. And as we see on this full show section, that's the first show in full that's available. So we kick things off with the Rise Rumble 2018. And another amazing event from that year was Point at the Sign 2018, where we saw the former best friends finally collide in that death match, the first ever Rise death match between Dr. Leonardo Darwin and Big F and Joe, where X Factor sensation Darwin's father, Wagner, showed up at the end unannounced to everyone's surprise and astonishment. That show, Point at the Sign 2018, will be available in HD very soon. But we skip to SummerSesh 2018 as the next show that's available in full. So we go from the Rise Rumble 2018 and then we go straight to SummerSesh 2018, which was also at the Brunel Social Club. And that main event featured Dr. Leonardo Darwin versus the Pastor for the Rise Championship. We also saw the famous Loser Leaves Town match, Boris versus Martin Kirby. And this was right at the start of Sober. This is the early days of the formation of Sober. So Martin Kirby faced Boris Kozlov with Boris's career on the line. A great match those two had, and that match is available as part of SummerSesh 2018 in full. And then a few months later, moving on to Christmas time, we had Big Fucking Joe's Christmas Bash. A very memorable Rise show looking back. And this was our second event at Chief Street. The first event at Chief Street, Beer Bash, earlier on in 2018. That'll be one of the shows I'll post in full. That's available to watch at patreon.com/riseunderground now. And it has been since it happened back in 2018. But I'm going to be uploading a better version, full HD, to YouTube of that show. That was our first show at Chief Street that year. We then had Slamdown, Thursday night Slamdown between SummerSesh and Big Joe's Christmas Bash that took place in September of that year. That will also be uploaded in HD. So by the time we got to Big Fucking Joe's Christmas Bash, this was the third show at Chief Street that year. And this was the show where we saw Big Joe versus Lou Nixon in that Type A death match. The UK's first ever Type A death match. And Lou Nixon dived in head first in the deep end. When I gave that opportunity to Lou Nixon, I truly believed he was capable of it. But lots of people didn't. And I was getting advice from a lot of people to say, he's not ready for it yet, you're throwing him in the deep end too early. And there were arguments for that, which I agree with. But Lou Nixon proved that he could handle it, proved we'd made the right decision to put him in that spot, and he proved that he could hang with who I consider to be the top deathmatch wrestler in Europe, Big F and Joe, and he took him to his limits. What a match they had, that Type A deathmatch. Historical. Highlights of that, full extended highlights are available at YouTube, and that will be upcoming as one of the Full Match Fridays in full. So you'll get to see that match in full for the first time, if you haven't already seen it on the Big Joe's Christmas Bash show that was posted. So you can see it in full on that show if you want, but the standalone match will be uploaded to YouTube soon. That's also the same night where Darwin faced the Bulk in a non-title match. And Darwin was knocked out in the most horrific way we've ever seen. And that video has had nearly 1.5 million views on YouTube now. It's called The Sickest Knockout of All Time. So go and have a look at that and make sure you've not just eaten before you watch it. Because it's a bit of a stomach churner. Unless you're into that sort of thing, that is. Because there's a few comments where it's clear a few of them are. We also saw at the Christmas Bash me versus Michael Caden in that Sambuca street fight that resulted in me vomiting, whiting all over the ring, where I'd had a can of lager splashed in my face after being sober for 6 months, and I ended up whiting all over the ring. As the countdown was going from 10 seconds down to 0, it was good. If it got to 0, I would have had to drink some Sambuca, and I fucking projectile vomited all over the ring, begging Caden not to give us a shot. And I was saved by the skin of my teeth by sober. Miles came out on the phone. He was on the phone to his dad. We hadn't met Miles' dad at this point. He was on the phone to his dad, who was a lawyer, saying that this is no way legal, that I'm going to have to be forced to drink Sambuca. And it all kicked off and it escalated and it became a 6-man tag match between Me and Sober Team B, which was B.A. Rose and Miles, versus Caden and Boys to Men. Shenanigans galore that night. Big Joe's Christmas batch. So get that watched if you haven't seen it already at YouTube or the full shows section. Moving on, and I'm going to try to move through these a bit quicker because I can't spend forever on each show because, like I say, a lot of these are going to have their own episodes eventually. And if they aren't podcast episodes, we're going to be doing watch-alongs and things while we waiting for any sense of normality, which I doubt we're going to get, but I'll not go into that subject too much either. If you've been following me on Facebook, you'll know my opinions about everything that's going on in the world at the moment. Swiftly moving on anyway. These shows we do have booked for 2021 will happen regardless. I'm going to use those dates at Eiger Studios, even if we still lock down. I'll do some behind closed doors events there, and we will follow all the protocols and the procedures. Eiger Studios have been absolutely on top of all that. How do you think Eiger Studios have been able to operate as a rehearsal space throughout this last year? They've got everything in place so that it is considered a safe environment by the council, by the government. So if we are given the opportunity to run some Rise shows behind closed doors in March the 27th, that first date that we have booked there, you can bet your bottom dollar that's exactly what we're going to do. So there is going to be some new Rise content coming out this year, regardless of what happens in this world. And it will take place in a wrestling ring. It's not just going to be all outdoors like it was last year with the match we had on the moors and things like that. You are going to see a lot more of stuff like that this year. But I promise you, you are going to see some wrestling in a ring this year from Rise. Whether that's virtual, online, or whether that's in person. But if restrictions are lifted coming up to the summer, I booked those dates with that in mind. I didn't book any shows for January and February because I saw this lockdown coming a mile away, as we all did. Most of us did anyway. So I tried to use a bit of foresight with that and think, let's wait until the end of March to book our first date in, and we'll go from there. So hopefully we might be able to run that March 27th show, which as it stands at the moment is the Outlaw Cup. And there's already been all of the tickets sold for the Outlaw Cup that are available. So I'm going to leave that up to the ticket holders to decide what they want to do. If that show can't happen on the 27th with a limited capacity crowd, then we can move that show to later on in the year if people want to do that, if the ticket holders would rather wait. But you never know. By summer, and I really do think that by summer, we might see restricted shows being allowed to come back, like we saw last year, where it'll be indoor events with limited capacity. And if that is the case, then we're going to stick with those dates and we'll run shows with limited capacity. So it's up to you. If you want to buy tickets now, you can do that. You can get your tickets in now because there are limited tickets for each event and the tickets are selling. So there are limited spots available if you want to come to one of those shows in spring and summer this year. But I would also advise, if you're not too sure and you think that they might be called off, maybe wait a couple of months to scope it out and see whether you want to get your tickets then. But I'll keep everyone updated on what the numbers are like for those tickets. If they are running low, I'll let everyone know, and then you can get in there and get your tickets to make sure that you've definitely got a spot when we are allowed a live audience back at some point this year. But I'm all but expecting another winter lockdown at the back end of this year because I'm thinking that these lockdowns are here to stay now. This is the way it's going to be for a few years. They've set the precedent now with lockdowns, and it's becoming normalised, unfortunately. Most people now think that lockdown is just a concept that's completely normal, whereas when lockdown was first introduced last year, that was an absolute crazy thing. Even saying the word lockdown, I used to think, what the hell is this term that's become so normalised so quickly? But now it's just part of our everyday language. But that's the world we're living in, and you have to adapt, you have to overcome, you have to improvise, and that's exactly what we do here at Rise Underground. So, to summarise about those 2021 dates, March the 27th, Outlaw Cup. As it stands, that's still happening, but we'll see what happens when it comes to regulation. If it needs to be reorganised, we'll change it for later in the year, August, September. And then all those other dates starting in May, I think, is it May the 1st, the first one after that? And then there's May, June, July, August. Shows booked in for those months. Like I say, we might get to actually have a live crowd there for some of them. And that is the dream in this situation. Obviously, in an absolute fantasy world, which used to be normality less than a year ago, we would have a full house in. But the way the world is now, we'll be happy if we can even have a few people live in attendance for these shows this year. So March the 27th, Outlaw Cup, May, June, July, August. We'll be doing tapings on all of those dates, regardless of whether there's a crowd there or not. But I hope and I pray that we are going to be able to be joined again, together. The Rise Faithful and the Rise Wrestlers from England's maddest wrestling show. In the last episode, I was saying I needed to take notes before I do these episodes because I keep going on so many tangents and off the subject so much. I've talked about the 2021 dates just there that was supposed to be a section within itself, and I've done that while I was talking about, somehow, 2018 shows. So I've gone from talking about 2018 shows to talking about the current shows somehow. I don't know where that link was formed, but there we go. At least I've covered that. It might not necessarily be in linear order, but I've covered it. But back to what I was talking about. We then kick off 2019 on this full show section, and we have every show from 2019 available, apart from one, and I'll tell you about that in a second when we get to it. So we've got the Rise Rumble 2019 from the Brunel Social Club, and I'm just going to skim over these, because 2019 was our busiest year, and I want to do a podcast about 2019, like I say, when I do these episodes about specific topics. So we've got Rise Rumble 2019, we've got the Lambrini Ring Rave. There is a link to that is unlisted on YouTube, so it is available to watch, but it's not the public version. That's going to be posted in full HD very soon. After that, we've got Teesside Hardcore, the first Extreme Rise Rumble in Middlesbrough, our return to Middlesbrough after quite a while. That was actually our first return to Middlesbrough since that famous Borough Body Slam show, actually. So it wasn't until 2019 that we returned. And this was at Base Camp. That couldn't be more suited to Rise. And we'll be doing some more work at Base Camp this year. And you'll hear more about that as we start to make plans as we move through 2021. After the Extreme Rise Rumble, we had probably the most famous Rise event to date, and that was the Games of Death, the original Games of Death tournament, featuring the hipster heartthrob, Casanova Valentine. And I interviewed Cass in a hotel room in Middlesbrough a couple of days after the Games of Death. What a crazy weekend we had that weekend. That was the maddest session weekend of my life, that. And me and Cass were in a hotel in Borough after just being on the drink for like the whole time he was here, 4 or 5 days. He'd slept like a log, man. I've never known anyone sleep more than Casanova Valentine. He'd had plenty of sleep. I hadn't had so much. And it got down to where it was just me and him left at the end in Middlesbrough in a hotel room. His flight was due the next morning in London. So he had to travel all the way from Middlesbrough to London at like 6 or 7 a.m. the next morning. So we were like, right, we'll just get a few beers and we'll do a podcast. Because I was working on getting the ball rolling with O'Doherty's Den, even back then, in early 2019. So we did that podcast in the hotel room, and you can listen to that now as a Patreon exclusive at patreon.com/riseunderground. And that was after Cass had won the Games of Death tournament and was, at the time, the current Rise champion. And you'll be able to find out all about his backstory and some of the parallels me and Cass share when it comes to producing our art and following our passion, which is pro wrestling. It's amazing some of the people you meet from around the world and from all over the country, all over Europe, where you just have such a connection with them because they've got that same passion that you have. And it's such a rare thing to find out. I'm sure wrestling fans who are listening to this find the same thing when they meet other wrestling fans. It's been like that all my life when I was just a wrestling fan before I got into wrestling. Meeting someone else who loved wrestling was such a blessing to be able to talk to someone who shared that rare similarity. And you just bond with someone straight away when they love wrestling. And that's why it's such a shame that we see all this trouble on Twitter and Facebook and all the hate and the fighting going on within the wrestling community, and especially the British wrestling community. Wrestling is this thing where we're all bonded over our love for it. So why are we fighting over it? We spend enough time fighting with people who don't understand what wrestling's about. The normal world gives us enough grief as it is about our love for pro wrestling, so for us to be fighting amongst ourselves is just madness. But that's the way society is at the moment. Everyone's fighting amongst themselves. Divide and rule in full effect. And as I say, personally, I think the only way out of this is by uniting. Will we see everyone unite in 2021? Or will we see the start of everyone uniting in 2021? I was on the phone to Jay Apter yesterday, the TNT promoter, TNT Extreme Wrestling. Me and Jay have been mates since day one. He started TNT around about the same time as Rise. It's very similar time that we had our first shows, and we've been on the exact same path since then. We've gone through all the same struggles, and we've always kept in touch with each other throughout the years. Phone calls, and we've got totally different styles of promoting, and we've got totally different perspectives on wrestling and what sort of shows we like to put on. But when it comes to the passion and the commitment and the drive and just everything it takes to be in this game, me and Jay are on exactly the same page, and we're actually going to work together now to try and clean up British wrestling even more, because the point I made a few months ago when I did that Yorkshire Evening Post interview was that if we're going to be getting rid of abusive wrestlers, then the same needs to be applied to the fans. We can't be having abusive fans coming to shows and then going home and ruining the lives of people online. Whether that's fans, wrestlers, or whoever they decide to troll and attack, they need to be weeded out as well. There's no way those people should be allowed to attend shows and have power over people. So me and Jay are working together. We've been speaking to Equity. We're going to see if we can get some sort of promoters union on the go where we can put a stop to this type of abusive fan who just dictates the business online. They go on Twitter, and just because they've got a few thousand followers, they feel like they've got more power than the wrestlers or the promoters, and they can say what they want and destroy people's lives, make people's lives a misery. And it's just not on. It's not fair whatsoever. So hopefully we can put a stop to that, and we can start taking out the trash. So anyway, back to the matter at hand, the 2019 full shows. After the Games of Death, we had Point at the Sign 2. And you can hear a little ting in the background there. That was Caden. Anyway, Point at the Sign 2. That big 8-man main event where the winner would go to Las Vegas to challenge Casanova Valentine to bring that Rise Championship home. And I was in that main event. I'd rather be in the main event than breathe, brother. That was the first time I'd been in the main event in Rise, as part of this 8-man battle royal. What a match that was. What a fun match to watch and to be a part of. Certainly wasn't fun at the end when I turned around. Big Joe was the last entrant left with me, and I turned around into that Death Valley driver. I can tell you that wasn't fun. But apart from that, watching it back, what a laugh. And what a great show Point at the Sign 2 was, start to finish as well. That show's available in full. And all of these shows accompanied by commentary from Tom Campbell, who I believe is the #1 commentator in the UK. Hands down. Absolutely brilliant. What a commentator Tom Campbell is. And commentators are so underrated in wrestling. I've turned my hand to commentary lately over this last year or so, where we haven't been able to wrestle. I've been commentating over some of the Rise shows, as you'll see with the Extreme Rise Rumble. I did the commentary on that full show. And you would not believe how difficult commentary is and how much of a misunderstood art form commentary is. The commentator is responsible for telling you what's going on throughout the show. So if you've got a crap commentator who's commentated over brilliant wrestling, he's going to bring the quality of the show down. So you need top quality commentators in the same way that you need everyone to be top quality what they do. You need top quality refs. You need top quality camera staff, videos, photography. You need top quality venues. You need everyone needs to be on the same page and needs to be at the top of the game for these shows to be what they've been over the years, and that is brilliant. I can't praise the staff that I've worked with over these years enough. There's no way a Rise would be where it is without the work of everyone involved. And Point at the Sign 2 was a great example of that. This was done on the night of WrestleMania 20... I can't remember what number it was. There's been that many. 30 something. Was it 30? Was it... Point at the Sign 2019. So it was WrestleMania night 2019. The last WrestleMania we ever saw before the world ended, where it was with a full stadium. Who was the main event that night? Can't remember. It was the night where Brock Lesnar got beat off Seth Rollins straight away in the opener. Because we went round to... Where did we watch it? It was the Royal Park next to the Brunel Social Club. We had a WrestleMania party afterwards in there, after Point at the Sign. And that was where There He Goes came from. With Saxon Huxley, there he goes again. The whole building in the Royal Park singing that at like 3 or 4 in the morning when he was going home. Because he'd had enough, he was falling asleep, he went home. Saxon, and the whole building was football singing that song to him as he left. It's just a shame that song never took off at Rise shows. There's a few times, a few of the Rise faithful tried to get it going at shows after that, but it never took off. Hopefully it will, eventually. So moving on from Point at the Sign 2, I'm not going to go into the results and tell you what matches there were too much, because it's spoilers, innit? So, after that, we had our debut in Bradford. Welcome to paradise, Bradford. Heavy levels of sarcasm with the name of this show. And this was in Trash Nightclub. And it's the night where Big Joe and Martin Kirby ended up fighting in the streets of Bradford. And Big Joe threw Martin Kirby onto a car bonnet in the middle of the street. So we nearly got barred from Bradford as well after our first show and our first night there. And that was another great show, start to finish as well. That's available to watch in full. 2019 was a hell of a year when it came to just bell-to-bell shows. Brilliant, every one of them. So moving on from that, we had the greatest ever Ascent tournament, the first ever 16-man Ascent tournament. Every Ascent tournament up until this point had been 8-person over the space of just the one night. This was over 2 days, a full weekend at the Temple of Boom. So on the first night, all of the first round matches took place. And bell to bell, that was, I think, our best wrestling show we've ever had in terms of solid wrestling matches. No gimmicks this night. This was straight up 8 solid wrestling matches, all fighting for one prize, and that was to become the Ascent champion, to face the Rise champion for that championship belt at Summersesh in the main event at Brunel Social Club. And we saw some major upsets in this tournament. And we saw the rise of the amazing Boy One. Now, this was the time that we were feuding with the so-called British Wrestling Revolution, BWR, who had been showing up, causing havoc at our shows. So we decided we'll give them a taste of their own medicine. Me, Kid, and Big Joe showed up to one of their shows, their Rumble. You can tell they've been watching Rise, BWR. They had their Rumble, their first Riot Rumble, I think they called it, last year, 2019. Big F and Joe showed up, Hoyt, Tyler Devlin out of the Rumble. And they proceeded to brawl around the building. Me and Caden showed up, kicked fuck out of Big Kink. Caden hit him with the chair shot heard around the world, which later came back to bite us big time, because we got our heads stoved in with a steel chair, because of Caden's weak chair shot. Later on, when we faced the team of the Kinky Party, Jack Jester and Shah Samuels, me and Caden. So there'd been, up to this point, a few months of back and forward where we'd been feuding on each other's shows. And it got to the point where the first night of Ascent, actually, Ascent Day 1, Big Joe and a lot of the Rise crew were actually at BWR that night. So there was a big run-in at the end at BWR where Rise came out, attacked the BWR lads, and then, as a receipt, the following night, in Leeds at Ascent Night 2, it was decided that Team BWR, Tyler Devlin had chose Will Cruz to be his tag team partner, were to face the team, the Deathmatch Dream Team of Big F and Joe and Michael Caden, the two true Rise originals, teaming up for the first time in this absolutely insane deathmatch that ended the Ascent Tournament Night 2 after we just crowned the Ascent winner only moments before. The celebrations were cut short when BWR came out, attacked them, and that's when Caden and Big Joe showed up, and we went into that big tag team deathmatch, which is available to watch, as always, at YouTube. I'm not going to talk about the BWR events that we were part of after this. I'm just going to keep it to the 2019 Rise shows, and I'll briefly mention those BWR events, but you can watch whatever happened at their events on their on-demand service, I would assume. I don't know off the top of my head what that is, but I'm sure if you Google British Wrestling Revolution, BWR, you'll be able to find where they host their shows, and you'll be able to see some of the things that were going on as we were invading them in 2019, giving them a taste of their own medicine, giving them what for. So we move on to Summersesh 2019, and this was the rise of the amazing Boy One, as Boy One faced Big F and Joe for the Rise Championship in the main event, David and Goliath. Boy One is another one of those that I think is one of the most underestimated talents, not only in the UK, but in Europe, in the world. He's phenomenal. How is this guy not a superstar? I do not know. But you can best believe me, he's a superstar in Rise. The Rise faithful absolutely love him. And rightfully so. There's no better story of rising from the bottom to the top than Boy One. He came into Rise in 2017, at the Ascent Tournament 2017, as Sean Oney's bag carrier. And there he was, 2 years later, main event in Summersesh at the Brunel Social Club in front of a sold-out crowd. At Summersesh 2017, he was on the doors at the pre-show, giving out bottles of all the cheap beer to people. That was his role at 2017 Summer Sesh. So in the space of 2 years, he'd gone from being Sean Only's bag carrier, giving out free drinks on the pre-show, to being the main event. Amazing performance from the amazing Boy One. And then after this was where it's hard to talk about. I'm heartbroken even speaking about it. Slam Down 2, Joe Your Roll, where the footage went missing. The only show in Rise history where the full event has gone missing. So you will never get to see that full show, Slam Down 2, Joe Your Roll. I always back up the Rise footage as soon as I get home. As soon as I get home from the events, I get home. First thing I do is back the footage up. For some reason, I don't know why that was, I didn't back the footage up this night. I got home, immediately, I was up till like 6 o'clock in the morning, as soon as I got home from the event, editing this footage of the main event, which was Boris versus Big Joe, and this was Boris's last ever match. If Boris didn't win the Rise Championship, he was going to retire, because he was having to face a hip operation. And we'd seen that tribute package, the Rise of the Mad Russian, leading up to this match. So Boris had it all to gain and nothing to lose with this match, and he went Deathmatch with Big Joe. Big Joe took Boris to a place he's never been before, and the Mad Russian came up just short. But he'd earned the respect of Big Joe, and he'd earned my respect back after that 2-year almost feud me and Boris had, as I was the leader of Sober, doing everything in my power to rid the world of Boris Kozlov and everything he stood for. But it was impossible. It was not to be. I could not get rid of that Mad Russian. And at the end of this match, we thought we were about to say goodbye to the Mad Russian. He gave a heartfelt speech to the Rise faithful, thanking everyone for supporting him throughout his journey. Big Joe gave him a handshake, a massive hug, out of respect for the match they'd just had that night. I have got the hard cam footage actually of this show, so it's not really very good quality, but it's something at least. So if anyone does want to see Slam Down 2, Joe Your Roll, such a shame as well, because we had amazing graphics that were based on the SmackDown 2 Know Your Roll game. So it's such a shame. We even had a screen and stuff set up on stage, so we had all the bells and whistles to make this a really top-produced show. We'd even had the ropes made blue for the SmackDown theme. Can you believe it? And we haven't got it on camera. I've only got the little bits of highlights that I managed to do the day after the show, and then for some reason, I don't know where the memory stick went. It went missing shortly after this, with all the footage on, and it wasn't backed up. First show ever that I hadn't backed up, and lo and behold, it was the first show that went missing. So the hardcam footage of that show is available, and there is a few clips, like the Gimp vs. Don Black. I was managed to get some footage of that, and there was a few clips of the Slobber Knocker match, Shreddy Brigade. But at the end of this heartfelt speech from Boris, we thought we were going to say goodbye. All of a sudden, the lights went off, and this video message appeared on the screen. Chilling. And I get goosebumps thinking about it still, because it was such a shocking moment where Boris was confronted with this footage that appeared to show him as a young man, speaking with an English accent, not a Russian accent, saying it's time to party like it's 1999 again. What was this in reference to? We were soon to find out as we went into Spooky Sam 3. Boris turned round after seeing that video message appear on screen and received a tape cassette bash straight over his head. And there stood Rory Coyle, the video nasty, who clearly knew something about Boris that we didn't. Rory Coyle claimed Boris wasn't going to leave on his terms. Boris wasn't going to be able to tell the final chapter of his story. Rory Coyle was going to tell the final chapter for him. So as we saw at Spooky Sam 3, Rory Coyle had left a bunch of tapes all around Temple of Boom on Halloween night. This was a Thursday night, Halloween 2019. And in order to find out what he knew about Boris Kozlov, Boris had to find these tapes himself. And members of the Rise Faithful were helping Boris to track these tapes down throughout the venue. And all of that is available to watch, as I keep saying, at YouTube, as with all these shows. And the full Spooky Sam 3 show was uploaded last year, 2020, in full for everyone to be able to watch. And that also featured the main event no-ring death match between Casanova Valentine and Big F and Joe. This was the rematch from the Games of Death. These two men had travelled across the pond back and forward, feuding with each other in this international blood feud. The scores were even at 2-2, and this was the decider for the Rise Championship in Leeds, UK. Big Joe on his home turf against the hipster heartthrob. Spooky Slam 3 was originally only supposed to be that one no-ring deathmatch. It was just going to be a special Rise event where it was Big Joe versus Casanova Valentine in a no-ring deathmatch. But it got so much publicity and it did so well and there was such a buzz, we decided, you know what? Let's hire in the ring and let's put a full show on. So Spooky Slam 3, what you actually saw, was a show that was put together in the space of a week because the demand was so high for this event. With it being no, it wasn't actually a Thursday. I think it was a Wednesday night Halloween, wasn't it? Whatever night it was midweek. It wasn't a weekend. So we didn't expect a sellout crowd, but that's exactly what we got on Halloween night 2019. And that's one of our best shows start to finish, I think. I know I keep saying all of the shows are the best shows, but Spooky Slam 3, bell to bell, was brilliant. 6 matches, all great, solid matches that embodied everything Rise is about. All different. It was a complete variety show, like Rise is. After Spooky Slam 3, the following month, we had our 5th anniversary celebration in Middlesbrough, which was where it all began. And this was much like Spooky Slam, where it wasn't planned to be such a big event, but it turned out to be our most successful Middlesbrough event yet in terms of the turnout and overall just the atmosphere and the show in general. It was supposed to be more of a party originally, just a 5th anniversary celebratory party with some wrestling matches as part of it. But that as well evolved into a full-scale show, which the main event was Big F and Joe versus Saxon Huxley, and what a fitting match that was for the 5th anniversary. The two heavyweights that had carried the Rise Championship on their shoulder, around their waist, for over a year apiece. Big Joe was the current Rise champion at the time of this match, so the tables had turned. Last time we saw Big Joe versus Saxon in Middlesbrough for that Falls Count Anywhere street fight. Saxon Huxley was the Rise champion. This time, it was Big Joe. We'd also seen these two collide in 2017 as a rematch to that street fight, where Big Joe faced Saxon Huxley at our first Iger Studios event in a last man standing match. And that show, that first ever show at Iger Studios, has never been posted online in full, so that's a show that's coming from 2017 that's going to be available in full, in HD. That footage was on an old laptop that went bust of mine, and I've ordered a adapter that allows me to access the hard drive off that, so I've been able to get the files from that original Iger Studios show. So that's a show that I'm going to be able to release in full for the very first time. And the main event of that match was the last man standing match, which is actually available though in full at YouTube to watch. But the rest of the show was lost for a good few years until I've been able to back this footage up. That was the same a night where, after all this stuff that had been going on between me and Darwin, we finally faced off in a kiss my ass match. The loser had to kiss the other guy's ass, and you can see what happened there when the full show's released. Dirty bastard. Anyway, back to more present times. The 5th anniversary show in Middlesbrough, like I say, that was one of those where it wasn't expected to be a full-scale show, but it turned out to be another great show for 2019. And that show has never been posted in full. And luckily I have got the footage for that one. The footage managed to survive. It's just never been put online in full. So the 5th anniversary show from Middlesbrough is going to be available at YouTube at some point this year. I don't know when that'll be. And it might be edited as like a compilation thing where it might be that we use that show as a celebration of the first 5 years of Rise or something like that. So it might have the matches from the night, but also showing you clips and different matches and all sorts of things from over the years. We'll see what we're going to do with that. But the footage is there. It's not gone missing, and you will get to see that show eventually. That's where Miles wrestled his dad, which is available on YouTube. Saxon vs. Big Joe, the main event, is also available in full from that night. You should play the O'Doherty's Den drinking game, where every time I mention YouTube or youtube.com, the Rise Online, you take a drink and you'd be hammered by now. Sackless. Speaking of getting sackless and hammered, I said I would keep you updated with how my drinking's going on. In the last episode, I said I was thinking about having a drink at Christmas because I hadn't drank for months leading up to Christmas. So I did have a few pints and a few wines over the Christmas period, over those few days of like Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, I had a couple of lagers, and I did my O'Doherty's Den intros, and I did my shout out to Catch Hal, my French mate, who was celebrating his French YouTube channel's first anniversary. So I'm the only one speaking English on the channel amongst all them lot. Giving a shout out and a plug to my O'Doherty's Den. So you can have a look at that if you speak French. Go to his channel, So Catch by Hal. Big shout out to him, who's been travelling over for Rise shows for the last few years because he loves Rise so much, and there's a few of them came over for one of the shows where they did a vlog on it. So if you go to his channel, it might still be up there, where it was their experience travelling over from France of what it was like to come to the Brunel Social Club for a Rise event. Might have been Point at the Sign, the original Point at the Sign. I'm not sure which event it actually was, but it is there for you to watch. So Catch by Hal, big shout out. So recorded a few videos, and I did a part of the first YouTube video episode where I was looking back at my old matches, my old, how I started Rise and the start of my career as Danny O'Doherty, the Lone Traveller. So I had couple of pints while I was doing that. The good news is that I've had no compulsion, no temptation, nothing to even have another sip of drink ever since. And that is great news for me, because normally when I've been trying to battle my alcohol use, I've wanted to quit, but deep down there's been a part of us that didn't want to quit. And I've always thought it's all or nothing for me. I've thought it's either I'm totally sober and I never drink again, or I just drink every weekend and have all these mad sessions. There was no middle ground for me, and that I've been trying to achieve that balance for years, and I just wasn't able to achieve it. But where we've not had shows for so long now, this is where I've been able to finally achieve that balance. So that is a good thing that's came from Rise being shut down for years. I've managed to get my head screwed on properly, and I can take this even more seriously than I ever was able to in the past. And then, this is where I start getting PTSD flashbacks. We enter 2020 when it comes to the full shows, and the Rise Rumble 2020. And I did a full review of the Rise Rumble 2020 in the last podcast. So if you want to know what happened and you haven't listened to the first episode, go back to episode 1 of O'Doherty's Den now and listen to that Rise Rumble 2020 review to find out what happened. As I say, for me, I think the Rise Rumble's been the top event every year for Rise, and the Rise Faithful agree, because it's been voted every year as the show of the year, the Rise Rumble. So, I'm going to put a poll in the Rise Faithful. If the Rise Rumble has been the best show of the year for consecutive years, we're going to find out what the best Rise show of all time is by putting in to the mix those Rise Rumble events. I'll put the Games of Death in there, because I think that got a massive amount of votes as well last year. So you get to decide what is the greatest Rise show of all time. And I'll put that poll in one of the groups. It'll either be in the official Rise group or the Rise Faithful group. So head there and have a look. If the poll's been posted, cast your vote and let me know what you think the best Rise show of all time is over these last few years. And leave a comment about why as well. I'd love to know why you think that's the best show. This period that we've got, where the world's all up in the air and we've got no shows, is a great time to be able to make our game plans for coming back and to think, what are the greatest and the best elements of Rise that we can apply coming back? And the Ascent Tournament, I can't wait for this year's Ascent Tournament, which is going to be taking place throughout the year at different venues, different locations. And I really feel like that's going to demonstrate the wrestling quality of Rise. That we're not just all shenanigans and gimmicks and carry on. That when it comes to wrestling, we have some of the best wrestling in the world. Liam Slater, one of those. You can watch that match that he had with Saxon Huxley. If you've not seen Liam Slater, who's entered himself into the Ascent Tournament 5, where if he wins, he gets to sign a Rise contract again. He lost a loser leaves Rise match right back at the start of January 2018 at the 2018 Rise Rumble against the grafter Dave Graves. So if you want to find out more about Liam Slater and who he is, a great place to start is by watching that match he had with Saxon Huxley at the Brunel Social Club. And we've got the up-and-coming talents in that tournament, such as Jack Turner, who at the start of 2020 was breaking out, and we thought this was going to be his big year until everything was shut down. But the thing is, Jack didn't let that hold him back. He challenged B.A. Rose to that match on the Moors. He couldn't wait until the Ascent Tournament, and how keen as mustard he was, worked out very well for him when he beat B.A. Rose and progressed through to the semi-finals of the Ascent Tournament. So we still have 3 quarter-final matches left to go, and we'll find out who Jack is facing in the next round once those matches have taken place. So I've spoke in the last episode, like I did about the Rise Rumble 2020, about the shows we did manage to get under our belts this year. And I put a little poll in the Rise Faithful to see, out of those shows we did do, which one people thought was the best. And people voted once again for the Rise Rumble as the show of the year 2020. Those two shows we had at Eiger Studios, Unplugged and the Extreme Rise Rumble, they're available in full to watch. And if you want to hear about those, like I say, go back to the last podcast episode, listen to the review about 2020. And that brings us up to date when it comes to the full show section of the RiseEngland.com website and all the things that are available to watch on demand anytime at YouTube. So I'm going to quickly go over the rest of the website, and then I should be receiving this phone call anytime now, where I'll be interviewed about Deathmatch Wrestling. So the next segment of the website is the Games of Death. So I'm not going to go into that because we've already talked about it. And like I say, I'll talk about more very soon when this lad rings us. We've got the O'Doherty's Den segment of the website, so we don't need to go into that because if you listen to this, you already know all about that. You can help support us at patreon.com/riseunderground for any early and exclusive content that's available. I'll put it on there first. Patreon is excellent because it allows me to be able to continue producing all of this content. Without Patreon, I would be absolutely fucked well and truly. There's no way I would have been able to continue producing Rise content without having at least some money coming in to help me pay these bills. Because I've got no ticket income coming from the shows, I'm not able to invest into merch to be able to sell more, so even though there isn't so much exclusive content available at Patreon like there is when shows are on the go, and you get those benefits of being able to enter the pre-shows for free when you're a Patreon subscriber, one thing you can be guaranteed is that your contribution, if you're a Patreon subscriber, is fundamental to the continuation and growth of Rise in 2021. And I, hand on heart, thank every single one of you who continue to donate any amount. It doesn't matter what it is. You can go on the general support tier, which is, I think that's £4 a month, something like that. Or you can subscribe to the higher tier, which comes with, I think you get a Rise sticker sent out by Patreon. If you're on that tier, there's other tiers where you get a t-shirt, and I think there's a hoodie tier. So if you go to Rise Underground, patreon.com/riseunderground, you'll be able to see what's on offer on the tier system, as if any of us need to hear about tiers anymore after 2020. Or another great way of supporting Rise is by buying any of the merch that's available on demand at the website, like I say. And we've got a full section of classic logo shirts. This is the original Rise logo shirt, and we've got this now in a range of different colours. So if you have a look onto the page here, they're all printed on a heavyweight Gildan t-shirt, and we've got sizes ranging from small all the way to 5XL. Huge range of sizes, range of colours. We've got black, white, red, navy blue, grey, pink, Carolina blue, maroon, and those shirts are timeless. They have been our best-selling shirts throughout the years, have just been the classic logo shirts, because I love those classic shirts. When we designed that Rise logo, it wasn't cool to wear wrestling shirts. Now it's a bit more accepted. You see so many wrestling shirts in public now, because wrestling shirts have become cooler as the years have gone on. But we wanted a wrestling shirt that was fashionable to a certain extent. We've then got a tab for the online community, the official Facebook group, which will link you straight to the Facebook page. Have you noticed how I say Facebook now? How I naturally say Facebook is Facebook. But every time I say it, people laugh at it that much and love it that it distracts people from what I'm saying. So I've ended up training myself to say book now instead of book. But when I'm talking naturally, I'll say book. So Facebook. The Facebook group, I've just changed the name of from official events to videos, announcements and events, since we haven't got many events to announce. So for discussion that is unmoderated by Rise, so it's a completely unbiased fan discussion, go to the Rise Faithful fan group set up by the Rise fans, for the Rise fans. And if you want the official stream coming from Rise, then head to the videos, announcements and events page, Rise Underground, the group, not a page, group. We've then got the Women's Wrestling Underground page, and I've spoke briefly about Women's Wrestling Underground on the last two episodes. So head to that page on the website if you want to get a taster of what to expect, as I say, with this second tournament we've got planned for 2021. Voodoo Queen vs. Lana Austin is on there, and that's one of our most viewed YouTube videos. That's at about 450,000 views or something like that. Up next is the Ascent tournament. We've talked about that. You can go on there to find all the updates as they happen. So if you want to keep up to date with the Ascent tournament, head to riseengland.com over these next few months, and that will have the lineup, the updates, the videos, everything to do with the Ascent tournament will be on riseengland.com on the Ascent tournament page. We've then got the sale page, which takes you directly to Big Cartel. That was going to be just for the end of the year sale, where it was going to be running from Boxing Day to New Year's Day, selling off all the bits of merch that I've still got in stock that need to be getting rid of as we move over onto the on-demand printing online. So I'm going to just leave that sale ongoing. There's a few items I've left on sale that are available at riseengland.bigcartel.com, or you can get to it through the sale tab on riseengland.com. And there's some signed event posters there available. There's the last few tie-dyes, one of a kind. There is the half-price Games of Death 2020 shirts. And there is the tickets for the upcoming events in 2021. All available at riseengland.bigcartel.com or through the sale tab of riseengland.com. And the final tab, read about us at ladbible.com. Lad Bible published a full article about Rise Underground and the passion involved from the likes of me, Big Joe, the Voodoo Queen, who were interviewed as part of this article. It was originally going to be a full-length documentary that Lad Bible came and filmed at the Spooky Slam 2 event. And I don't know what happened, but over the space of that year or two, it just never came to be. I kept getting emails from them saying, oh yeah, it's going to be released soon, but it never happened. And eventually we got an article that was released about us last year at the start of 2020. I can remember actually watching the Royal Rumble, the WWE Royal Rumble at our Royal Rumble party we hosted in Leeds last year. And that was the same day that the event, this article was published. So I can remember reading it while the Royal Rumble was on. And if you want to read that article in full, you can head to riseengland.com, click on that link, the Lad Bible page, and it'll take you straight directly to that. And hopefully we get some more coverage from Lad Bible in the future. They've got all that footage there sitting in their possession, so I don't know what they'll do with that and whether they'll ever use it. So keep an eye on Lad Bible. We have been shared over the years many times by Sport Bible and other similar pages like that. So hopefully we can get another break through one of these big platforms in 2021. And there we go. That is episode 2 of O'Doherty's Den. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, leave a review, blah, blah, blah. And we're now going to go to the interview. I should be receiving the call any time now. So I'm going to love you and leave you. I won't do an outro after the interview. It'll just be ending with the interview. I don't know how long it's going to go on for or anything like that, because I don't know what it entails, really. Last time, Caden called us unexpectedly, and I've organised another call for Caden for episode 3 of the O'Doherty's Den, when we talk about those early days of Rise, which will go along with my YouTube special that's coming out within these next couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. So keep an eye out for that. Keep your lugs peeled, your eyes peeled. Big Joe had a bit of criticism about that last episode, saying the sound quality wasn't good enough of the phone call from Caden. So I'll try my best to improve the sound quality, but there's nothing I can do really, because that's what a phone call sounds like. So unless Caden comes to the 21st century and gets some better equipment, which is unlikely, we're going to just have to put up with phone call sound quality for now. So there we go. I'll see you next time. Whoosh!
Okay, mate, right. Well, to start off with then, so for people going to a Rise show, how would you describe it in a nutshell? What would you expect from a basic, typical Rise show?
Well, I think the tagline itself, England's Maddest Wrestling Show, is probably the best way of describing it, because it just is from bell to bell. As soon as the show starts, it's just complete action from start to finish, and it's a variety show, most importantly, I think, which covers all different styles of wrestling. It's not just death matches that we do, it's all kinds of different styles of wrestling and characters and all that sort of stuff. So it's the death matches have a place because we build them up as such big matches when they do happen, and we've had that Games of Death tournament, which was the first time where we'd had more than one death match in one night. So it's not like we've got this reputation a bit of being a death match promotion, whereas in reality that's only one aspect of Rise.
Right, right. And what kind of made you decide to take it in this direction in particular?
It was just a natural progression, really. It was because of the guys like Big Joe, Michael Caden, who I got into the business with at the same time, just over 10 years ago with Caden. So me and him started Rise. I did all the promoting aspects and all that sort of thing. But he's heavily involved in the match planning and the booking of the shows. So he was always interested in death matches. I'd come from more of a mainstream wrestling background, watching WCW, WWF. So to me, I wasn't necessarily as knowledgeable about death matches, but through my friendship with him, I became aware of all sorts of different types of wrestling. And then obviously meeting Big Joe, he was massively into death matches when we first started Rise back in 2014, 2015. With the rise of Big Joe in particular as our top guy, it became a natural progression that he then, because we'd had like some hardcore matches that had started where it was like Caden, Darko, Big Joe in these early hardcore matches that was around about 2017, 2016. And it was after we'd started having these main event style matches with Big Joe. We'd start having street fights, Falls Count Anywhere with Saxon Huxley, the Muscle Cat, and they went down so well with the crowd. We were thinking that there is more of a market for this hardcore stuff, whereas at the start we weren't really going down the hardcore route. But it was this natural progression that the fans were really responding to. The hardcore matches started getting crazier in each time, like step by step. We just sort of like gradually brought them in over the space of like a year or two until they got to the point where they were just pure insane by the time it got like the Games of Death at that point.
Right, and in particular, is this what sets you apart from the rest of the Brit Rest scene?
I think it's part of what sets us apart. Yeah, I think it's a lot of the stuff, like I say, that you see online. Some of the viral clips we've had and stuff like that have been, a lot of them has been the deathmatch stuff. So that does go out there because it's got the shock value factor. So obviously people see that and it's like something they've never seen before. And because we were doing it in whenever it was 2017, these crazy spots that had never been seen in England before, it was this stuff that like I say, Big Joe and Caden had been watching death matches since they were kids, so they knew all these different things that had been done that had never been done in the UK. So we were the first ones to be doing these things, and obviously that was getting a lot of attention online with these videos we were putting out. So we did start pushing that stuff more when it came to like the online promotion and that sort of stuff.
Right. And deathmatch itself seems to be blowing up a bit all over the place. Is there any particular reason why you reckon that's happening right now?
I think it's similar to what I was just saying there about, I think we caught on that boom early and the things we were doing, we were putting out was getting such attention. I think other promotions that were on a similar wavelength were seeing that there was a market there at the same time, and there's been quite a lot of promotions have capitalised on it and realised that there are more wrestlers who are willing to go down that route. Because at the time when we were starting off these hardcore matches, we had to like sit and rack our brains thinking who could we have in these hardcore matches, because there was so little amount of deathmatch workers, for example, to choose from in the UK, whereas now we've built our guys up and there's an abundance to choose from when it comes to picking these tournaments and stuff, because there's so many guys now willing to do it and see it that it is possible to be successful doing death matches.
Yeah, I mean, Joe said something interesting to me the other day, which was that for a lot of wrestlers, deathmatch is kind of a bucket list sort of thing to do.
Yeah, it is. That definitely, I think it is. You see, that's why you see a lot of people dipping in and out. They'll have a few matches, realise it's maybe not for them or whatever, or they've done it, they've ticked it off the list, and then they won't stick with it. Whereas the likes of Joe, like I say, he's got such a passion for it, and Caden, who they've found their niche with death matches. That's what they want to be. They want to be deathmatch wrestlers and remembered for that. Whereas some people just do it because it's the hot topic of the month.
Right. And another thing that I've noticed that sets Rise apart from a lot of deathmatch is that you don't see a lot of kind of long-held feuds or storylines in deathmatch. So was that a conscious decision to kind of make that happen in this style of wrestling?
Oh yeah, definitely. That was what sort of made me gravitate towards deathmatch was realizing it actually it's weird when you look back. We went to the world premiere of The Trade, Nick Mondo's film, and it was shown in London. Me, Joe, like I say, obviously because Joe and Caden love the death matches, they dragged me and well, they didn't drag. I was well happy to go, but we were to drag Patrick Leonardo Darwin along, who he'd never seen. He wasn't interested in death matches, didn't know anything about it. So to him, it was all brand new. Whereas I'd been sort of introduced to it through Caden, and then, like I said, them two were fanatic about it. So when we saw The Trade, I saw the storytelling in that movie, in that like documentary style movie that he made, and it was, and I thought this is absolutely amazing. There's so much could be done with death matches that isn't being done in terms of telling stories, and obviously it's such a powerful thing itself when the live crowd is seeing that sort of stuff in front of their eyes with such a high risk factor and all the drama and stuff. It adds such a emotional connection to start with. I thought if you put a storyline involved with that, you're going to just have supercharged emotion that you're generating from the crowd, and I think that's why I was stood out when it came to the storylines. Like I say, the first death match we ever had was between Leonardo Darwin and Big Joe that had been built up for like over the space like 2 or 3 years that finally led to a death match. So it was from then that we started having these death matches, and we wanted to save it for a big match like that, like a big feud blow off.
Right. And so a big thing that you often hear from wrestlers that they say about bookers is that they'll often find that they don't get a lot of say in it. But I've been hearing the opposite about Rise, in that the talent there have way more scope to kind of talk to you and figure out storylines, and they get a lot more kind of creative control. Is that you know, that is, I'm guessing that's an important thing to you.
Oh yeah, that's I think that's like the bread and butter of Rise really, is having such a diverse opinion in terms of everyone is able to contribute what they think would work and add little bits and pieces to their gimmicks, to their storylines, to everything. It's like there's a basic outline, and then it's like a group effort. Like everyone contributes in their own way, and we come up with these like storylines that are based off all these different inputs. So that's why they have. I think it's so unique because you're getting so many different types of wrestler who are inputting into the creative aspects of it.
Right, right. Another thing about wrestling is it is and always has been obsessed with its own history. Now, with that, inevitably, people have been comparing Rise to older promotions such as ECW. Do you feel like those comparisons are fair? And what ways do you think you're bringing this forward into the future? What way do you think it's evolved?
Well, I think that the ECW comparison's easy to make because it was the first of its kind. So obviously, everyone that sees a modern, I wouldn't say a modern version of it because that's not what we are, but it's more like it is. I suppose it is. It's the same basic ingredients that made ECW successful, and what everyone loved about ECW is very similar to what Rise is, which is these sort of what you would consider homegrown talents that are so over with the Rise crowd and their home crowd, and it's like they've got like all these interconnected storylines and stuff that you don't often see in indie wrestling. So I think that's what generates so much emotion from the fans and such a connection and interest and stuff, is these long-term storylines we have going on all the time and stuff, and it is similar to ECW, like you used to say with like Raven, Sandman, or Tommy Dreamer. There's comparisons can be made with Rise when it comes to them, like them sort of like core guys you would associate with ECW. You have that when you think of Rise to a certain extent with the likes of me, Big Joe, Darwin, Saxon Huxley, Caden, and all those, like Boys to Men, for example, where that's a unique tag team we have in Rise that you don't see anywhere else. So I think that's where them sort of comparisons would come from, is that it's the same basic ingredients but applied to modern times, really, because we like to always be sort of current and relevant when it comes to the stuff we do, and rather than it being a tribute to the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And so I know it's kind of difficult to say at the moment with things the way they are, but how is your second Games of Death shaping up at the moment?
With that one, we're gonna hold off until we can have the full experience, so we can have the full crowd there. Because the thing is, we were so unlucky that the first lockdown came the week of the Games of Death. It was the same weekend that the Games of Death was supposed to take place. So obviously we'd had a lot of the tickets had already been sold. There was all the hype was generated. We had the flights booked, ready to go, and everything was set in place, ready to go. So it was a big knock to have that cancelled last minute. We were planning a big weekend of shows. So we're just going to try and, as best we can, reorganise that tournament for first opportunity we can when there's the ability to have at least 100 people there in the crowd and to have a real experience of what the Games of Death should be, because we want it to be the best tournament there's been in Europe. That's what all our intentions are, and we all set on doing that. So we really want to give it our all and 100%. So we're going to, in the meantime, while we're still working with restrictions, we're going to run the Outlaw Cup, which is we're working with the Deathmatch Outlaw brand, co-promoting it as like a mini tournament within itself, where that'll be Joe, Lou Nixon, Caden and Darko. So that'll be like a sort of prelude to the Games of Death. So, and then the Games of Death will be the big show. Hopefully, we've got it booked in for November the 6th, 2021. So if everything goes to plan, we might be able to run it then. But if not, we'll save it for when, like I say, the first opportunity we can run it properly.
Right. And do you think you'll be getting in between the ropes again this time? Because I know you didn't have a great time in the ring last time, did you?
No, I didn't. Not against Iceman. That was a good story itself, because the thing that my first connection to deathmatches actually was going to training in Newcastle WZW in 2007, and the head trainer at the time was Iceman. So I went there. He wasn't there for the first few sessions. He dipped in and out a couple of times, but I'd always known that Iceman was this legendary wrestler in terms of like the school I'd gone to, and that he was this deathmatch wrestler. And then years later, and it turns out he was from the same town as me as well, which was strange. And I'd met him when I was out drinking down the town sometimes, and it was crazy to think, oh, this is Iceman. And years later, he ended up in the Games of Death, and I wrestled him in the first round. So it all come round like full circle, and I got my ass kicked.
Yeah. There was quite a nasty. You took quite a nasty chair to the face in the beginning of that one.
Oh, that was a different. Oh yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I was going to say I thought you were talking about the time I had the big lump on my head and the black eye off.
Oh no, no, I do remember that, but no, I think early on you gashed your head pretty badly with a.
Oh yeah, off the chair. Yeah, that
yeah.
was it. I think he threw the chair at us, and I had me bouncer with us as well, who was taking all me knocks for us.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So for the future then, so let's say like, everything's back up and running, you can get your crowds in. Are there any guys out there who putting out into the universe now? Is there anyone you'd be interested in booking?
Well, we had Schlack booked for this original, the second Games of Death tournament, and Casanova Valentine, I think he's absolutely unbelievable. For me, he's the best hardcore wrestler in the world at the moment, or deathmatch wrestler. So I'm happy enough to keep working with Casanova, but I think the lineup we had, that Games of Death tournament, I would stick with that if I had the choice, I think, because that tournament is unique in terms of it's different to any other deathmatch lineup you'll see. It's got the homegrown guys, majority. It's got Tyler Devlin in there, who impressed us when we did that feud with BWR last year in 2019. And he's got a really unique risk-taking style that's different to anyone else. So I think he would have brought a lot to the tournament. And I like to give opportunities to people who you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in these bigger stages and platforms. So I think that would have been, for me, that would have been the perfect lineup, having Casanova and then Schlack as the two US imports, and then you've got Iceman. He was saying that would have been his last tournament. He was going to be going into that as he wins it or he retires. So, and we've heard Iceman say he's retiring a few times, but he reckons this is it this time, and he's going to save his last match for the Games of Death. So that's another thing to look forward to.
All right, so it'll be quite special then. But, so I'm kind of getting a sense that a lot of your focus is on kind of letting that creativity kind of flow between your wrestlers, and also you've got a big focus on bringing people up, introducing people, and focusing on new guys.
There's so many talents locally that you can get so much out of. I think it's silly to be bringing guys in who are over elsewhere when on your doorstep you've got so many talented people who all they need is a platform and a few different tweaks and a star. So I think, and we've seen that a lot in Rise with a lot of the guys that have started at the bottom and they've literally rose to the top in terms of their progression with the crowd now over they've gotten and then getting into the main events and stuff. And it's good to look back now because we've got the YouTube channel there, which is I've got loads of stuff that I'm releasing, all the stuff from over the years, and it's good to look back now and you can see those how these characters and all these storylines have progressed and stuff, and how the evolution of the death matches as well.
Okay, that's great. Speaking of the death matches, being England's maddest wrestling show, are there certain challenges that you face in terms of venues and things like that?
That's always been the challenge, has been playing it by ear and thinking when's the right time to just start going crazy, because we used to get a venue and we think, well, we can't just have a mental death match straight away and get kicked out, so we're going to have to at least keep them sweet for a show or two, and then we'll eventually start going more hardcore with it. But then that philosophy went out the window where it got to the point where we were just having, if there was a death match booked, we were having it wherever it was, and the venues were so. We've had such a good relationship with all our venues anyway, and they were so on board with what we were doing. They trusted us, and they knew that it was worth it in the long term because they were seeing the crowds it was bringing in and stuff, and how much attention it was getting, and it was working for everyone. Like the amount of alcohol and the drinks they were selling at our shows and the money they were making, they were all for it. So it's only been Sheaf Street after the Games of Death, we lost the venue because of that. But I think when I look back, I think the amount of weapons that were left over and all that, and this big high quality venue that's got like sound systems and lights worth tens of thousands of pounds hanging up above the ring, and you've got people coming off the top rope, and there's all that sort of carry on with the Games of Death and all the weapons and stuff, glass flying everywhere. I think they thought it was a bit too much for them, so they pulled the plug. But hopefully we might get another shot there because I think they've got a different venue opening, and the current venue we work with, Iger Studios, they completely behind us in terms of our trust in our creativity. But at the Brownell Social Club, that's our big venue. We don't necessarily need to go as hardcore there. There has been some crazy moments there and some big hardcore matches. That first death match was actually there. That's more like our big, if it was WWE, that would be more like our big pay-per-view, so to speak. So they don't necessarily have to be so hardcore focused, but we do more of our hardcore matches at the smaller venues like Temple of Boom. That was like the home for the death matches. When I think of those matches, it's Temple of Boom, because that was like a punk DIY venue, so it was perfectly suited.
Excellent. Personally speaking as well, what are some of your favourite moments from Rise?
I think they are those, like the things I've mentioned, that Darwin and Big Joe match from the first ever Point at the Sign. That was after we'd got the cease and desist from WWE because we were calling it Rise-A-Mania. And I got an email from WWE saying that we need to stop, or they'll take legal action and all this sort of stuff. So we had to call the show Point at the Sign instead. And it was showing a live pay-per-view that couldn't be named afterwards. So that was the one where it was Darwin versus Big Joe. They'd had this absolutely insane death match. And then Wagner off X Factor shows up at the end. Darwin's dad, apparently. And that was, to me, I think that's the moment everyone remembers. And there's been, I would say, that moment, and I would say the Big Joe winning the Rise Rumble after a year to the day after Darwin had screwed him over and betrayed him at the Rise Rumble 2018, where he got that heated reaction where it was all the cans being thrown into the ring, and I've never seen hate like that for a finish in my life. So a year to the day, Big Joe wins it, astronomical pop, and everyone's in the ring celebrating, Lambrini celebration in the ring. So I think them's the moments that I think of when I look back. And I also fondly remember the matches Caden and Big Joe had at the Temple of Boom, them death matches. They were, because they were so, at the time, they were the first of the kind. They were the first ones we'd done in Rise, and they were the first crazy death matches that had been seen in the UK for a long time as well. So I think there'd only been the odd death matches you'd seen in Progress, and ICW had done a few different things, and I think it was the first time people had seen some of these more extreme things.
Right. Okay. Well, okay. Well, that's been brilliant, mate. I think I've gotten plenty for you. It's been absolutely fantastic. So you'll be in the second issue of the Deathmatch mag, and that will be coming up in like end of Feb, March time.
Oh, spot on, yeah. So will that just be a written version of everything we've talked about, basically? Is that what's... And it'll be published in there along with Big Joe?
Yeah, so there'll be Big Joe. I've just received an email off Gene Money as well to get a few words, get a quick statement from him, and I've spoken to Cass as well. So
Spot on, yeah.
yeah, because I kind of wanted because it's a US magazine, so I kind of wanted a perspective of someone from across the pond, like their time over there at Rise.
I was just talking in my own podcast today, actually, about Cass, and saying it's the parallels me and Cass have in terms of the way we view wrestling and how we got into wrestling through doing it this sort of unorthodox way. And it's crazy how we've both done that simultaneously at this, like across the pond, and then we've connected through Rise and doing these matches. And Cass, I feel like, is one of the lads when it comes to the Rise family. So it's like he's like a good mate that we keep in contact ever since, and we've just got that connection where we get wrestling the same way I do with Joe and Darwin and Caden and all them lot.
Yeah, it is weird. He does really kind of match that attitude of just doing things differently and doing something new and fresh.
Oh yeah, he's definitely, like I say, I highly rate him.
Excellent, yeah. Well, I'll definitely be getting in touch with him for a few words about Rise as well then. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll just let you know when it's in print. But like I say, you can follow them on Instagram and stuff, and they'll put a lot of stuff up there already. So yeah, just check it out. It's like a proper magazine.